I'm Elizabeth Ray.
I'm Alistair Stevens.
And Tom Cruise is Ray Ferrier in War of the Worlds.
So War of the Worlds is published as a novel in 1898. It's the sixth of H.G. Wells's 50 or so books. It had previously been serialized in Pearson's Magazine in the UK and brilliantly serialized in Cosmopolitan in the US. So, you can get your War of the Worlds, you can get your Martian invasion, and 10 sex tips that will drive him crazy all at the same time. It attracted this colossal audience. Wells was paid £200 for the novel, and it has never been out of print since it was first published in 1898, which is
nice work.
A huge accomplishment, I think. Wells is inspired by the developing theories of biology and evolution at the time, as well as the British colonial extermination of the native peoples of Tasmania. At least in Wells's time, it was thought that the native peoples of Tasmania had been completely exterminated along with their culture. We have subsequently discovered that thankfully was not true, but it is still a horrifying thing to contemplate. Wells takes the observations of Mars made by Giovanni Schiaparelli, who identifies these long, straight channels on the surface of the red planet, and Stéphane Yavel, a French astronomer who reported seeing flashes of light on the surface of Mars in August of 1894. Even alongside the rest of H.G. Wells's work, The Time Machine and The Invisible Man and The First Man on the Moon and The Shape of Things to Come, even compared to those books, let alone the works of Jules Verne, The War of the Worlds has a strong argument for being the most influential science fiction novel of all time. It popularizes the word Martian, for example. It presents for the first time an entirely natural alien race which is technologically superior to humanity. It's aggressively neutral in its depiction of religion. It anticipates modern military strategy as the Martians systematically disable transport and communication lines as the first move in their attack against Earth. It is a hugely influential work. In 1938, War of the Worlds is adapted for radio for the first time by Orson Welles for the program The Mercury Theatre on the Air, broadcast by CBS. Welles, Orson in this case, also narrated the hour-long drama, which is presented for the first two acts as actual news broadcasts. And we've all heard the stories, right? We know how the broadcast caused panic because people believed that it was real, and emergency switchboards are jammed with calls and people flee the towns into the countryside. Almost none of that is true.
Oh, no.
Almost none of it
What a
ever
great
happened.
myth.
The show was fairly popular. It attracted an audience of around 1 million people, which is still a pretty good number, but by no means the biggest thing happening on radio that year. But there's almost no evidence that anyone believed it was real, not even for a minute, and certainly no evidence that anyone packed up their belongings and fled into the countryside. These stories come exclusively from newspapers in the days and the weeks following the broadcast, who took against the show as a means of discrediting radio as a source of news. They're proving it to be unreliable, proving it to be fictional, proving it to be, dangerous. And B, a means of making fun of poor, rural, and let's be honest, black people for the benefit of a cultured and educated and urban readership.
Gross.
It's gross.
Yeah,
it's really
that's
gross.
awful.
It is a deliberate plan of attack against radio as a medium. And it's taken such deep root in the culture that very reliable sources still believe that this is true.
Wow.
It does make a great story, though, is the problem.
It reminds me of the scene where the CBS journalist is like, "Oh, were you on the flight? Oh, that's too bad. Would have made a great story." And then slams the van door shut. And I just think, God, fucking journalists, man. Just hate the whole quote-unquote news. It's just gossip and gross exploitation.
And fear-mongering.
And fear-mongering.
Like a huge, healthy dose of fear-mongering, for sure, War of the Worlds has been adapted 16 more times for radio, including in 2018 by Big Finish Productions with Richard Armitage as the unnamed narrator of the story. It was first adapted for film in 1953 by Byron Haskin, but you know the thing about Byron Haskin?
I don't.
He's not Steven Spielberg.
He's not. I did know that, actually.
And that makes this the most dominant, I think, adaptation of War of the Worlds that we have to date. What is your experience with H.G. Wells coming into this?
So I had read War of the Worlds and much of H.G. Wells, actually. I think that I had some kind of cool, leather-bound Barnes & Noble gold leaf page edition of like the works of H.G. Wells.
Sure.
So I read just about all of it and loved it. Just thought it was all so cool and really accessible to me at 15 or whatever it was that I was reading it. I had also tried my dad's Isaac Asimov, and I was like, this is not maybe as accessible to me, but the H.G. Wells
Certainly
I
not
really
as
liked.
accessible. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Asimov is one of my favorite writers.
I'm
but yes,
sure,
a
I'm
very,
sure.
A much more challenging writer, and much more intentionally so, I think,
Yeah.
too. Wells is writing in this great, like, late Victorian tradition of the scientific romance. Right? These are
Yeah.
kind of fantasy stories that are not really differentiated from other fantasy stories by the fact that they are, by the standards of the time, rigorously scientifically accurate. We know now that you can't really make a giant gun to fire a projectile into space that will carry you to another celestial body, but at the time they didn't know that you couldn't, so they thought that you could. I love H.G. Wells. I think he's just extraordinarily influential. And I love Verne, too. I know that you're supposed to pick a side in that great divide of who is the godfather of science fiction.
Verne
But
too. Yeah.
Verne also, I think maybe, I don't know if I could pick favorite. Maybe at some point in the future, over on the Patreon exclusive insider shows, we sometimes play that game, 5-minute top 5, where you give me a subject and I have 5 minutes to come up with a top 5 in that category. That would be a fun thing to do. Like top 5 influential science fiction novels would be a fun way to go. But
it would be.
definitely War of the Worlds would be on it, and probably number 1, because it's really hard, I think, to overstate its importance in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into our discussion of this very good and weird and flawed and interesting and crunchy movie.
Yeah.
But before that, I have to do the trailer game. So let's do that.
Let's do it.
No one would have believed in the early years of the 21st century that someday movies would not contain real, actual sets, or crowds of hundreds of people, or a fuselage of a decommissioned Boeing 747 that we use for like 2 minutes and then discard. As men busied themselves with actual props and real lenses on cameras, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic at the studios looked down upon the production infrastructure of Hollywood, and they drew their CGI plans against us. Tom Cruise is a bad, bad dad in War of the Worlds.
That was maybe my favorite yet.
Thank you so much. So we move into the pre-production for War of the Worlds directly off the back of Minority Report. Spielberg and Cruise love working with each other on Minority Report, have nothing but complimentary things to say about one another, and are in like active pursuit of their next project. Cruise puts some ideas together. 3 ideas, we are told. He puts together 3 different packets, goes to visit Spielberg on the set of Catch Me If You Can, and Spielberg immediately says, War of the Worlds, that's the one I want to do. We don't know what the other 2 packets were. We don't know what those pitches were. It's never been released, so.
Oh, well, maybe we've seen them.
Maybe we have. Maybe those.
Maybe he made them. Somebody else. Forget you, Steve.
Oh, now I just want to go and look at both of their Wikipedia pages and try and figure out which projects were in that bundle of pitches right there. Mm-hmm. So they shake hands. They decide they're going to do a 2005 production for a 2006 release because it's Spielberg and Cruise, so their dance cards are pretty full at the time. Spielberg goes to up-and-coming filmmaker JJ Abrams to tap him to write the script, and Abrams says that he can't because he's currently in pre-production for this TV show called Lost, which he's really excited about and definitely very committed to, and which will probably turn out quite well and will be remembered as a bad show, even though it's a very good show. Weird that Abrams had all of that foresight. Instead, they go to David Koepp, who had written Toy Soldiers, not Small Soldiers, who had written Death Becomes Her, had written Jurassic Park and Carlito's Way, has a co-writing credit on Mission Impossible, which is where we've mentioned him before. He had just written Panic Room for David Fincher and Spider-Man for Sam Raimi.
Damn.
So he is betting 1,000 at this point. In the meantime, as Koepp is working on the script, Spielberg's going to go off and make Munich, and Cruise is going to go and make Mission Impossible 3 with director Joe Carnahan off of a Frank Darabont script. It has Kenneth Branagh as the villain. It's bound to be a fantastic film, right? Obviously, you can see where things are falling apart. Yes, Kenneth Branagh, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Scarlett Johansson all signed on for this
Wow.
Joe Carnahan version of Mission Impossible 3. Joe Carnahan, though, gets in a giant hissy fit with the studio and walks off the project. The entire thing is suspended, and suddenly Cruise has this gap in his schedule. He loves the script that David Koepp writes for War of the Worlds. He's so excited to do it. He goes to Spielberg and says, okay, can you push off Munich for 6 months? And then we can make this film right now and we can have it come out next year. So instead of a 2005 production for a 2006 release, they compress pre-production, production, and post-production into a 10-month window.
That is
starting
insane.
in August of 2004 for this film.
Whoa.
10 months start to finish.
Damn.
He also goes to JJ Abrams and says, hey, since your schedule is now a little more open, since Lost will be done by this point, do you feel like writing Mission Impossible 3? We'll pick up on that story next time.
All right. Good story.
So they have 10 months on the clock. They have a lot to do, and they start, of course, by casting out the rest of the film. It's an interesting cast, I think.
It is.
Maybe not one that you would pick. I mean, the only absolute certain bit of casting is Dakota Fanning, because you wouldn't have a girl of this age in a movie at that time without it being Dakota Fanning if you could possibly get her. She's terrific in this film.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
She's born in 1994 in Georgia. She begins acting at the age of 5, appearing in commercials for Tide and in an episode of ER, an episode of CSI, an episode of The Practice, an episode of Spin City, and an episode of Ally McBeal. All of those in the year 2000.
Dang.
So she goes from 0 to 60 immediately. She appears with her younger sister Elle in I Am Sam in 2001 when she is 7 years old. She remains the youngest person to ever be nominated for a SAG award.
Wow.
Spielberg sees her in that film and casts her in his sci-fi show Taken, not the Liam Neeson movie, but an alien abduction miniseries.
Vague recollection of that.
It was a pretty good show, as I recall. Justin Chatwin, who plays Robbie in this film, also appeared, but he wasn't, a lead. In 2002, Dakota Fanning is in Trapped and Sweet Home Alabama and Hansel and Gretel. In 2003, she is in Uptown Girls and The Cat in the Hat, and she is the voice of the young Kim Possible. In 2004, she's in Man on Fire and voices Satsuki in the English dub of My Neighbor Totoro. And in 2005, alongside War of the Worlds, she appears in Dreamer, in 9 Lives, in Hide and Seek, and replaces DeVay Chase as the voice of Lilo in Lilo and Stitch 2, which is, of course, the third Lilo and Stitch movie.
Okay.
Gotta love that, right? You didn't have to number it, you guys. You didn't number the second one. You didn't have to number the third one. And if you were going to number the third one, might I suggest the numeral 3?
This industry, I swear.
After this movie, Dakota Fanning will be the voice of Coraline, of course. She will appear throughout the Twilight series. She'll be in Ocean's 8, and she'll be in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And most recently, Ripley, the show that was a Showtime show and was then bought out by Netflix because Showtime's pockets aren't as deep as once they were. You just watched all of the Andrew Scott Ripley.
I did.
What did you think of it? What did you think of her?
Okay, well, first I thought it was beautiful. Really just stunning to watch. The cinematography, I know everyone's talking about it, and you should be. I mean, every single frame is flippin' gorgeous. It's really beautifully done.
It's incredibly high concept cinematography, too. It's got a real luscious intentionality about it. Yeah.
Definitely. I thought she was great. I hadn't seen her in a long time, or hadn't noticed her in a long time if I had. And she was doing this really lovely, cold, affected, unreadable but suspicious thing that just totally worked for me. I thought she was great.
That's really great to hear. Yeah, I think that the common consensus on Dakota Fanning is that she is an outrageously talented young actor. And then pretty much around the time that she appears in War of the Worlds, all of that goes away.
Yeah.
And she just loses whatever it is that makes her
Elle
magical.
Fanning's doing a lot of stuff right now.
Still working. Absolutely, yeah. But, I mean, Dakota is 30 years old as of now. So
wow.
She's still got a lot of career ahead of her. And it's great to hear that she's doing interesting work.
Yeah, I certainly thought so.
Miranda Otto, naturally cast as Dakota Fanning's mom, she's born in 1967 in Brisbane, Australia. She and her friends would write and perform plays for the neighborhood in her spare time.
That's adorable.
Which leads to her being cast in the Nimrod Theatre in Sydney when she's just a young teen, a very well-respected theatre with a very well-respected program. In 86, she is cast in Emma's War, a World War II drama. After graduating from college, her first role is in a romantic comedy called The Girl Who Came Late, in which she stars opposite Martin Kemp, the lead singer of Spandau Ballet. It's 1991. So all of the
Okay,
things that I just said are cool, I promise.
Right.
Even if they haven't aged terribly well. In that year, she receives 2 nominations from the Australian Film Institute and is recognized as a major new talent. She makes a movie called The Nostradamus Kid with Noah Taylor, who will later play the tech support figure in Vanilla Sky. So we talked about him already. And then appears in Sex is a Four-Letter Word in 1995. In 1997, she appears in a movie called Doing Time for Patsy Cline, which, great title, and also requires her to perform country music songs.
I love that.
She starts dating her co-star in that movie, Richard Roxburgh, who we discussed during Mission Impossible 2.
Neat.
Otto comes to the US in 2000 for What Lies Beneath, the Robert Zemeckis supernatural thriller. That is a great movie.
I haven't seen it in a long time, but I loved it.
Really good film. Then she's off to New Zealand again after Uma Thurman turns down the role of Éowyn, the White Lady of Rohan, the sister to Éomer, the wife to Faramir, the Lady of Ithilien, the slayer of the Witch King of Angmar. She is no man. An absolutely underrated part of that series. I think she is fantastic. As Éowyn is so often underrated by readers of the book too, so it's nothing that's particularly unique to the film trilogy. But I think she is so good in those films.
She's wonderful. I agree.
And absolutely anchors a real humanity that would otherwise be all but completely absent from the Two Towers in particular. I think she just does magnificent work throughout that film.
Agreed.
Spielberg is so impressed by her in The Lord of the Rings that he offers her this part without an audition. He literally just calls her up. It's apparently 6 a.m. in Australia when she takes the call. And it's Steven Spielberg on the phone.
Right.
And he offers her the part. And she says no. She says that she can't do it because she is newly pregnant with her first child. He says, no problem. We will change the script. We will write around it. Not a problem. Please come to America and make this film.
Wow.
So she does. Apparently, she had real plot. Apparently, there were cut scenes that involved her character. There were action scenes that involved her character.
Wow.
That are all just cut because by the time that they get to shooting, you know, the dialogue stuff, because their production schedule is so short, they have to shoot all of the dramatic CGI stuff very early. All of the action scenes have to be shot first to give the CGI animators time to make the rest of the magic happen.
Right.
So they shoot all the dialogue stuff at the end, by which time she is very, very pregnant indeed. And absolutely glowing, like absolutely beautiful in this film.
I completely agree.
Such a great performance. After making War of the Worlds, she goes back to Australia for a couple of years. She goes back to theatre for a couple of years and then kind of returns to film on this very casual and eclectic basis. She has this enviable variety in her filmography. She makes films in every single possible genre. It's amazing. Awesome. She is reprising her role of Éowyn and she's narrating the upcoming animated War of the Rohirrim movie that's coming out later this year.
Cool.
She's also in an episode of Miss Fisher because she's Australian and is required to be. And that's a really great series that at some point I think we're going to return to. She's also in a season of Rake with Richard Roxburgh, which we've discussed before, as well as apparently playing Aunt Zelda in the 2 seasons of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah.
The CW adaptation of
Sure.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Yeah, which is set, I guess, in the Riverdale continuity because Sabrina is an Archie character originally.
Oh, okay.
So those things coexist. So they also just made this weird spooky horror show for teens over on the CW. Those people on the CW, man. That Greg Berlanti, he's just doing what he wants. Let's talk a little about Tim Robbins, because it's not a very deep bench in this film. For all that it has a literal cast of thousands, like the actual featured players are not too numerous. Tim Robbins was born in 1958 in California, and from the beginning of his career, from the age of 12, he's equally interested in theater and film. He graduates the UCLA Film School with a BA in drama in 1981. He begins an experimental theater called The Actors Gang with a group of friends, including John Cusack. His first film role is Toy Soldiers, not Small Soldiers. Again. He's Merlin in Top Gun. That's the first of the 2 times that he will work with Cruise. Then he breaks in Bull Durham, of course, in 1988, which is the same year where he marries co-star Susan Sarandon. He's the lead in Robert Altman's The Player. He's just fantastic in that in 1992. 94 is The Shawshank Redemption and The Hudsucker Proxy, both in that year. 95 is Dead Man Walking. 2000 is Mission to Mars and High Fidelity. 2003 is Mystic River. It's just a great career. I'm always glad to see him show up.
It's funny that when he first came on screen, I heard him before I saw him, and I was sure it was going to be John Malkovich. And then when he showed up, I was like, you could have been John Malkovich.
It's weirdly
really
like
that
a
kind
really
of role.
good alternate casting. Yeah. Except I'm not sure that you relax around John Malkovich for like a second. I'm not sure you relax around this version of Robbins either, honestly.
I certainly did not.
That, I don't know, almost supernatural thing that he has. Casting him in a movie with Dakota Fanning. is weird, right? Because we're representing a very small number of real human beings in this film, and two of them are Dakota Fanning and Tim Robbins, both of whom have this
Kind of
ethereal,
otherworldly
energy. It's a really interesting choice, but I
Yeah.
think he absolutely delivers
Oh,
in this
totally.
movie. Just
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't deliver in this movie is Justin Chatwin. I will say, let me put this right up front.
Okay.
Justin Chatwin seems to be a very cool, extremely lovely person in real life. I have nothing bad to say about the man in real life at all. This is a genuinely very terrible, start to finish, soup to nuts, first to last performance. This is just, it's awful, right?
I don't think it bothered me as much as it bothered you. I thought the character was terrible. Like, there's only so much you can do with that guy.
The character is terrible. That's
Yeah.
true. The writing really fails.
Yes.
David Kapp has a real mastery of structure as a screenwriter. I think that he can really like knock out a robust structure. He's very, Robert McKee oriented. So he has like a great sense of setup and payoff. He likes to establish and then return to these core concepts as he's moving through the story, which is good, but he doesn't have a great handle on character. And I think that basically everyone in this film kind of suffers from that. The kids in particular
Yeah.
suffer from that. And yeah, Robbie more so than anyone, I think. Justin Chatwin is 22 when he gets this role. He goes up against dozens of other young men to be,
Yeah.
the next star of Hollywood. Interestingly, this is the first actor who has ever played on screen Tom Cruise's son. I was going back through the list.
Whoa.
That's right, isn't it? We've got Ray in Jerry
Right.
Maguire, of course.
Right.
So there's an asterisk attached to that. And, arguably Brad Pitt in Interview with the Vampire. But that's it.
Yeah.
This is the first time that Cruise
Huh.
has played like a dad.
Yeah, you're right.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
And is just very consistent, I think, with the atypical approach to characterization that Cruise takes in this. It's such a weird, non-Cruisy kind of character.
Yeah, well, even just being like a blue-collar dock worker guy,
Yeah.
like that's not Cruise either.
Or, at least affecting a blue-collar guy. Off the success of War of the Worlds, Justin Chatwin gets a small part in Lost. He is a part of the cult that draws in John Locke in a season 3 flashback episode. He gets the lead role in David S. Goyer's The Invisible. He gets the lead in the live-action Dragon Ball in 2009. Good
Whoa.
Lord. He shoots 40 episodes of Shameless between 2011 and 2015.
Oh.
He's the villain in the 2016 Doctor Who Christmas special. And otherwise,
Yeah.
he just kind of bounces around riding his motorcycle and doing indie projects and really does, I will say again, really does seem to be a very cool guy.
That's good.
And that is our cast. The shoot for this film runs from November 8th, 2004 to March 7th, 2005. That's 16 weeks before release. They wrap
Damn.
principal photography
Holy
for a
smokes.
film of this magnitude.
Yeah.
The film shoots extensively in New Jersey and Virginia with a couple of pickups in New York. They shoot some of the exteriors in Brooklyn, and they do additional work in California. The studio sets they do in California, which is basically just the basement, I think. It's basically just that extended
Sure.
sequence is the
Yeah.
only thing that they shoot on set. The cinematographer, again, is Janusz Kaminski, who shot Jerry Maguire and Minority Report.
you can
Since
see it.
then, he's made Catch Me If You Can with Spielberg and The Terminal with Spielberg.
Such
So
different movies.
Weird
Yeah.
to think of Spielberg coming off The Terminal
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah.
Although The Terminal is also a much bigger film than you remember it being. Like,
I'm
it's,
sure that's
it's a
true.
much more expensive
Yeah.
and complicated film than you remember it being. Kaminski, as I've said before, will continue to work with Spielberg all the way through to The Fabelmans. He also shot, the most recent thing on his IMDb is this upcoming John Krasinski movie, If, about a girl who can see imaginary friends. It has
Okay.
It has Ryan Reynolds and it has Krasinski and it has, I've got the list here of all the
Yes,
voices who are in this
yes.
film. Here we go. Voice cast in this film: Steve Carell, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Louis Gossett Jr., Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Maya Rudolph, Jon Stewart, Sam Rockwell, Awkwafina, Blake Lively, Matthew Rhys, Bradley Cooper, Keegan-Michael Key, Amy Schumer, Vince Vaughn, and George Clooney.
Holy smokes.
The heavens were dark, for all the stars were in some film I'm never going to see.
With our kids, I think that you are.
I probably am. This is John Krasinski. This is written, produced, directed, and starring John Krasinski. He is making a
Wow.
serious swing here for
He
being the
is.
subject of our second season here on The Last Star in Hollywood. Quick Krasinski sidebar. What do you think of him? Are you interested in him as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
I mean, I saw the first of the Scary Noise of Monsters
Quiet Place.
movie.
Yeah.
Quiet Place, thank
Yeah.
you. And enjoyed that. I haven't seen the second one.
He handles that tension in that first one very well,
Yeah.
I think. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what he does as a filmmaker. I didn't follow his Jack Ryan Amazon series because
no.
I don't care about that at all.
I don't care. Yes.
He's made an unconvincing turn to like action star, which I'm not completely sure that I can follow him on.
This
but
makes much more
I find
sense.
him
Like
interesting,
in a family movie about someone
Sure.
who can see, imaginary friends. That sounds much more like what I would expect John Krasinski to come up with.
Oh
I
my God,
feel
which
like.
Nancy Meyers movie is he in? He's in. Is he in? It's Complicated.
Yes, that's the one.
In the weirdest role.
So weird.
Ah,
Yeah, that strange conglomeration of several characters that they mushed into one. So now he says really weird things.
That's
to
our
his
thesis.
Stepmother or mother-in-law.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has a weirdly intimate relationship with his someday mother-in-law.
Someday
because
mother-in-law,
just,
future mother-in-law. Yes.
Yeah, it's
Odd.
very strange. So anyway, that's that movie upcoming, I guess, shot by Janusz Kaminski. So I'm sure it will at least look beautiful. The music for this film is from John Williams, though I don't know that it's one of his most memorable scores, honestly. The sound design throughout, I think, is excellent. The movie is nominated
really cool.
for 3 Academy Awards: sound editing, sound mixing, and visual effects, and loses all 3 to Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Ew.
Yeah, you didn't think I was going to say King Kong,
I
did you?
didn't. I was going to say, well...
Well, it was the Return of the King here, but it wasn't anymore. King Kong.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
We should also talk a little bit about Cruise, most of which we're going to do over on a Patreon-exclusive bonus episode.
Yes.
Right after we finish recording this episode of The Last Star in Hollywood. So we're going to be probably a little bit punch-drunk by then, because this is the film. This is the moment. After breaking up with Penelope Cruz, the Church of Scientology allegedly conducts auditions to find him a long-term partner who will be suitable, stable, and open to his role within the church itself. The winner of this search, if winner is the right word, is Iranian-British actress Nazanin Boniadi. They date for 3 months before breaking up. Later, Boniadi would leave Scientology. She would appear on Grey's Anatomy and then get a major role in Amazon's Rings of Power series.
Sure, cool.
She also, weirdly, looks quite a lot like Katie Holmes, who is the next young woman who Cruise begins dating despite a 16-year age gap.
God.
On May 23rd, 2005, Cruise goes on the Oprah Winfrey Show ostensibly to promote War of the Worlds. Spielberg is supposed to appear on that episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show too. They're kind of echoing an appearance that they made in 2002 to promote Minority Report, which was extremely successful. But because of the compressed post-production schedule for this film, Spielberg can't take the time out of the editing bay to go and appear on Oprah. So Cruise does the show by himself, and we all know what happens. So we are going to watch that segment of the Oprah Winfrey Show, and we're going to watch the segment that Cruise does on Leno, kind of as an apology tour, kind of, but also weirdly doubling down on the whole thing. That's a strange moment. And we'll probably end up watching the segment that he does with the now disgraced presenter, Matt Lauer, I think. We'll probably cover all 3 of those over on the Patreon and really dig in a little bit on what happens. But this is also right at the time that Perez Hilton and like celebrity gossip blogs are really coming up, and the sharks are circling.
They sure are.
And it ruins Spielberg's relationship with Cruise. He is publicly critical of Cruise following this. Mostly, it seems, because his job was to promote War of the Worlds, and he did a really bad job.
Yeah.
He argues, Spielberg has argued in the past, that his appearance on Oprah Winfrey cost War of the Worlds $30 million in its opening weekend. He thinks that the movie would have been an even bigger hit, and this movie is a huge hit. But he argues that it would have been an even bigger hit. He also has, personal connections with psychiatrists and actual doctors about whom Cruise has a lot of opinions at this point in his career, because Scientology is wild.
Yeah, interesting. God. Although you would think they say no press is bad press.
That's what they say. We'll talk about that over on the Patreon. Patreon.com/nextword. War of the Worlds, then, is released on June the 28th, early for the July 1st weekend of 2005, which is coincidentally the first day of principal photography on Munich. Like, Spielberg really runs these things back to back.
Oh my God, I'm exhausted just thinking about that.
War of the Worlds goes in at number 1 at the box office, ahead of the 3rd week of Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, the 4th week of the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, very bad Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
I want it to be good.
We all want it to be good. We all want it to be the 2nd week of the Nicole Kidman Bewitched, which is a genuinely bizarre film.
We have to talk about that one day. Yeah.
I can't imagine under what circumstances we'll... Do you guys want us to talk about that on the Patreon? We'll just take the weirdest Tom Cruise film.
That wouldn't make any sense.
As an alternate for Tropic Thunder, we'll go and talk about Bewitched, one of the most bizarre and incomprehensible films I have ever seen in my life. And just also in the box office, the second week of Lindsay Lohan in Herbie Fully Loaded, a movie that I bet you loved at the time.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Contrary to what you might hear now, War of the Worlds is a huge success. It makes $604 million off of, admittedly, a very large budget of $132 million. It is the fourth most profitable movie in 2005, just ahead of the Peter Jackson King Kong, tucked in behind The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a movie I recently discussed over on Stars and Swords. Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith makes $868 million that year, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire makes $896 million that year. That means that the most successful movie of 2005, which isn't a part of pre-existing intellectual property, is the sixth movie on the list. The first film at the box office that year, the most successful film at the box office that year that isn't based on something else, is number 6. It's the animated movie Madagascar, which is extremely bad.
Yeah.
But here's what's wild. One of the story artists on the animated masterpiece Madagascar, Simon Wells, the great-grandson of H.G. Wells.
Whoa.
Just an odd little confluence there. Yeah.
Huh.
And that is the very compressed pre-production, production, and post-production story of The War of the Worlds.
Wild.
It kind of makes more sense as a movie when you know, A, the short schedule that they had. Like, it does feel a little unfinished in some ways.
It maybe does. Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, I never say that a movie could be longer, but I could have this one be a little longer to give me more character development stuff. There's a lot of like big set pieces, maybe too many. Maybe we don't need the Boeing and the train and the ferry. Like, there's a lot that's going on.
Really hard argument to make, I think, that you can cut the Boeing.
Maybe not
despite
the
Boeing.
No.
Despite the fact that it is completely
stunning.
irrelevant, but it is so stunning.
Yeah.
To do
so
all
unsettling.
of that for no real narrative effect at all.
Well, yeah, not
Like,
narrative.
Also,
yeah,
a completely different terrible thing happened, right? Not completely different, but a different terrible thing happened.
Yeah.
And we get to see it in this really luxurious detail, despite the fact that it doesn't really move the needle on our understanding of what's going on.
Yeah,
It's a strange choice. This is the thing. I think that this movie is really hampered by Koepp's script. I think that his commitment to structure leaves us with a very staccato series of vignettes that seem very disconnected the one from the other. Like, as we move from thing to thing to thing, it's like levels in a video game. Now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do the ferry. Now we're going to do the basement. Now we're and those things don't stitch together as well as I would like them to. Nobody arcs in this film.
No.
People have sudden moments of revelation and transformation, and then oftentimes reset back to where they were.
Yeah.
But there's no real movement through the story, which is a problem. I think that the success of this film is almost all in the first half. I think that even the setup, the first 10 minutes that we get before the lightning begins to strike, I think is so good and assured and confident. Let's get into it, shall we? We begin, of course, with, we get the DreamWorks logo, we get the Paramount logo, we get little Bugs, little Paramecia hanging out.
Right.
And then we get Morgan Freeman using his Morgan Freeman voice.
He's just the best voiceover guy. He's the narrator I want.
Of course, he's the narrator of the story in your head, I'm sure.
He is,
yeah.
yes.
He's fantastic. And to have him deliver this HD, I mean, it's basically
so
exactly the same. We're switching out the 19th for the 21st centuries here. But other than that, it is taken exactly from H.G. Wells' original work, and it's a phenomenal bit of writing.
Yeah,
it
really is.
On every level, just really works.
I think I wrote down baller opening, but it is.
So we open on Ray Farrier, a dock worker in Brooklyn. That will play no further part in the proceedings, except that he begins the movie atop a giant machine, I suppose. Structural symbolism. Structural,
Sure, mastery of machines, and then the machines are mastering the man. I get it.
Right? He leaves his work site. He's arguing with his boss as a way of really establishing character, where he's just, I don't know, there are some women who can tell you what's wrong with me because I'm just a guy. Look, I'm Tom Cruise. So
I'm
cool.
just that guy.
I'm just that guy. I've got this extremely cool leather jacket.
It is
and this
an extremely cool leather
car.
jacket, though. I don't remember the cool car.
The 66 Mustang. It is a 66 Mustang that he has. He drives it in that opening scene, and then we hear about Robbie taking it and leaving it blocks away, and then we never see it again.
I can't believe I missed it. I usually have a sharp eye for a hot car.
So unnecessary.
Wow.
It was literally, if you blink, it's like a couple shots.
I was probably taking a note.
If you blink, you miss it.
Yeah, damn.
Turns out that Ray is late for the kid exchange with his ex-wife, the worst teenage boy in the world and the creepiest little girl. That's what we've got.
She's cute in her way, though. But
she is cute, but it is that otherworldly.
I like her costuming.
It's almost like the biggest miss swing in Hollywood is failing to cast Dakota Fanning as Luna Lovegood, right? It's such a natural fit for that character.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So we're introduced here, I think, very effectively to
very
Ray's
effectively.
character as we move through. Just
you
this
get all of them.
dysfunctional man-child. It's really great. What do you think of Cruise as a bad dad, as an archetypally bad dad? Cruise just as a guy who is not the hero of the piece.
Yeah. I think he's doing great work. I think
so too.
he's weirdly sexy, which is terrible because why? He's a bad dad, and I don't quite understand. Maybe it's just the jacket, the look. His look in general is good. I guess I'll put it that way.
His look in general is extremely good.
Right?
Yeah, I think you're completely
Yeah,
right.
he's
That jacket
coming
is doing
in-
a lot of the heavy
The jacket's
lifting
doing
for
a lot of work,
sure.
but he's coming out of that like boyish thing that just doesn't do anything for me and getting something that's like a little more interesting in his face that just works for
Well,
me.
and out of that like weirdly over-stylized thing that he's doing
with all the
between
long
kind of,
hair and all the facial hair that he had in Last Samurai, which was
and
like
that
so
Magnolia look, really, it's kind of been hanging
totally.
around for a few movies now.
Yeah.
And no, this is kind of original era Cruise, except you're right, without the boyish thing. And he's just so much more grounded. He doesn't feel as artificial in this film as he does in almost every
that's a
other
good way to
film in
put
his
it.
career.
It's true.
And it's nice to see him stretch a little bit and kind of have fun with the flaws in his character. I think it really works. He tells Dakota Fanning that he's going to go and take a nap. Oh, this is after, of course, we do the most aggressive baseball scene.
Oh yeah, but
in the
you're
world.
skipping so much. Yeah, I was thinking to me I loved the beat where the wife, Marianne is carrying the goddamn suitcase up the stairs because he can't even be bothered to do that. Like that's telling us a lot.
And how he's trying to like ineffectually be
let me do it. Let me do
husband,
it. But
a father,
not actually
but, like,
doing
not
anything.
actually really, really
Gross.
good.
But good. Yeah, that's good writing. The writing of the bad dad stuff I thought was good without being over the top. It was believable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because
in a movie that's very over the top a lot of times.
Sure. But you do buy him, I think, as, because bad dads don't know that they're bad dads. If bad dads knew that they were bad dads, they would stop being bad dads. The problem with bad dads is that bad dads think that they are good dads.
I don't think I can go with you on that.
I think guys like Ray believe that he believes that he's a good guy who's probably been screwed over by circumstance.
This is what I'm thinking. I think that he believes that he could have been a good dad if he just got the chance, if Marianne didn't break up with him. But now she's taken away his. I mean, now he can't be anything but a bum because he doesn't get to see his kids enough to be anything else. It's really her fault. That's what I get.
Exactly. He is 100% that guy. But he's still Tom Cruise, so he's got some of that charm. He's got he's a little bit fast on his feet. His little thing about this is a really safe and comfortable looking van as he's negging the Tim, I guess, Marianne's new husband or new partner. It's pretty good. It's a really solid character introduction.
I think so too.
We then get lightning strikes in the Ukraine, which is weird to hear on a news broadcast in a film of this period, honestly. We get all of that exposition. Then we go outside to play catch. You're absolutely right. With the world's most aggressive baseball throwing.
Yes.
Really good.
Good. Excellent.
Seeing Ray really lose his cool, genuinely lose his temper with his kid.
Yeah.
How often do you get to see that in a film that isn't, a harrowing discourse on, parental abuse? This is something very, very different that's happening here, particularly in the filmography of Tom Cruise.
A great space too. That backyard shot where they're so pulled back and you see all of the different lawns. We'll go back to it, of course, when the storm starts. Yeah. But that's a really neat space.
Tell me a little about what you think Janusz Kaminski's doing in this film, because it's a weird looking movie, right?
It is a weird looking movie.
Super bleached out.
Yeah, lots of lens flares. This is the beginning of the lens flare era, right?
It is, absolutely. Yeah.
And lots of blown out lighting again, which we've talked about before. In some cases, it works for me really nicely, especially in the really heightened spaces. But when it's just in the middle of an otherwise normal scene, I find it distracting.
Yeah, using it to I don't know, polarize this notion of domesticity, right? To kind of drag out all these hard contrasts when we're outside the house, even when the world is still normal.
Yeah.
Seems a little odd to me. It makes what comes a little less impressive, I think. And so, it doesn't always feel terribly intentional or terribly disciplined. And again, very compressed production schedule. So you can understand that. But it's interesting, at least. It is kind of an ugly film, but it's ugly in an interesting way.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of the production design made me feel that way. And I think that was really great. His whole house was really interesting. Just all of his mechanical shit everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The engine on the table.
I bought all of that and it was interesting to me.
Yeah. Ray decides at this point that he needs to take a nap because he works for a living, which is just a classic asshole thing to say at this point to your daughter. Tells her to order food. And then we get the most dated joke in the whole movie. which is his response to hummus.
Okay, you think that, but this is the thing, is that at that time, that was when hummus first started having a moment.
No, I'm saying.
And it was...
Absolutely.
You think that's why it's dated? Because who
dated
has
now,
never
right?
had hummus, but
Nobody
at the time...
has that response to hummus now.
Not anymore, because it reminds me of this meme or series of memes. It was a website then. I don't even know. I think it was a book, maybe. Stuff white people like.
I remember,
remember that?
Yes.
And hummus or parties with hummus was one of them.
Wow.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. Yeah.
It's just,
That's right.
a
There was
very
a time.
hacky, like 2004 era joke, honestly. Yeah.
And now it's like, spinach dip. Like everyone's heard of it. It's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's had it. Good versions, bad versions. Yeah.
We also get, right when he wakes up, he coughs ostentatiously in a way that in
Yes.
another film would mean that he has tuberculosis, right? But he definitely coughs. And then we talk about Rachel's splinter getting infected.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about with Cap.
Foreshadowing.
Do you have to do this? Also, it's War of the Worlds. I figure that maybe half of the audience already knows exactly how the film
Although
is
I
going
will
to
say
end.
I had forgotten.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
We got to the third act of the film last night and you had forgotten how it ended, which is, I think, really lovely, honestly. So we'll talk about how the ending works for you when we get to it, I guess. Ray runs out onto the street to find Robbie, but the neighbors are all staring at the storm clouds behind the house, which is really great. Then Amy Ryan is there, Holly from The Office.
Yeah, surprise.
In a very small apartment.
Yeah.
It's always so good to see her. I think she's so
I think
lovely.
So too.
Yeah.
This is cool. Like it's a little special effecty. It's a little CGI-y in a film that's otherwise got so many great practical effects happening, but still neat. Although I had trouble buying that anybody, well, maybe not anybody, but that so many people would just be standing outside looking up.
But this is the thing. This is the post 9/11 commentary on what 9/11 felt like in New York. That is why Spielberg is so attracted to the project in the first place. We are leaning really hard on that imagery specifically through like the first act of the story, I guess. And that is, there's tons of documentary evidence that says that is what people do. That is how people behave. And that's what we're facing in this point. And that idea too of the camera being very close to the ground, not physically close to the ground, but the camera being in a very human-like perspective.
Yeah.
So we are getting things occluded. There's so much in this film that we do not see, which I think is so powerful, but it gives that sense of confusion and calamity. It gives that sense that the world is coming apart at the seams in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I do
all of
agree
which
with
is
that.
supposed to be, of course, I wasn't in New York on September 11th, but all of which is supposed to be redolent of that experience.
That's interesting. And to me, I suppose I immediately thought of tornado weather. And
Of course.
in tornado
Yeah,
weather,
yeah.
of course you have the porch watchers, but it's on the porch, real close to wherever you need to be if you have to duck in. You know what I mean? There was no sense that we were going to have to take cover. You know
there
what I'm
are
saying?
more people out there watching the storms come in through the plains of Oklahoma than you would think.
Yeah, it's true.
Even people
it's
who
true.
have lived here all
Yeah.
their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But it is incredibly striking. And it's 15 minutes. We spent the first 15 minutes establishing these characters, really just establishing Ray and establishing this domestic dynamic. He's the only character that we care about. And if there is an arc in the film, it's his.
Right.
We'll maybe talk about that at the end too. But 15 minutes to get there, I think, is really strong. I love how he and Rachel, when they're out watching the lightning begin to strike, kind of have this echo chamber of fear. She gets scared and he tries to reassure her. Then he gets scared. So she gets more scared, which makes him more scared.
Yep.
And then when they turn to run back inside, he trips over the garden chair. 2 movies in a row where Tom Cruise trips over a chair. It's weird that it happened twice, is what I'm
I
saying.
guess it just works. I don't know.
Then the power goes out. It only takes
Right.
Ray 13 or 14 tries to figure out that the power has gone out.
Yeah.
He really does want to try a lot of switches just to make sure that the power has gone out.
It is
It
strange.
does feel like we spent
Double
maybe
check the ceiling fan.
5 minutes
What
doing this. Are
I
you
didn't-
sure? Out on the street, he finds Robbie, who just shows up, a thing that Robbie will continue to do through the span of this film.
Just show up and then just disappear when he's not supposed to.
We
Yeah.
find the
Or run off, I
hole
should
in
say.
the road. Ray goes to discover the hole in the road where the
where the
lightning
lightning
has
struck.
struck, where the asphalt has been fused to glass. And right now, I really do already hate Robbie very much in this film
Yeah.
and find him to just be a drag on every scene that he's in. But since he's not in this scene, and since we're shooting in this wide open intersection with like 70 people, I find this really effective. I'm all in on the movie at this point.
Yeah, no, I do too. It's also great evidence too of his being a bad dad. Like, go take care of your sister while I am curious and look into things
just
that are
indulging
dangerous.
my curiosity.
Yes,
Yes, exactly.
exactly. Yeah. Ugh, gross. Can you imagine something like that and not immediately, where are my kids? I need them with me right next to me the entire time.
And maybe we do
and hunker
arc
down
him
somewhere,
through
probably.
that. I'm always, well, we'll talk about it when we get to it,
Sure.
but I'm always very touched with the scene where they abandon the vehicle. And
Yes.
he takes Rachel. That is,
Yes.
to me, a really interesting character moment
I
for
agree.
Ray. We then get the emergence of the tripod in this extended sequence, most of which I still think looks really good. There's only a couple shots.
When it starts to rotate and like half of the church face starts to go with it, that's really cool.
There's a lot of the CGI stuff in this film I think really, really holds up. And just a few shots that don't, but this is also where we get the MVP of this film. We get the sound of the tripods.
Oh, so cool.
It is unbelievably
It makes me wish that I'd been
good.
able to see it in theaters because that
Can
must have
you
been
im-
awesome.
rumbling the seat underneath you. It is a
God.
digitally processed didgeridoo. That is the sound that we're hearing.
That's so cool. Of
Isn't that
course it
amazing?
is.
Yeah.
Now that you say it, like, duh. But wow.
It's
that's neat.
just fantastic.
Yeah. Super cool. What do you think in general of the look of the tripods?
I like them.
I think
they
I do too.
are a little fussy. They're not completely clear. Their scale is never completely clear to me when
Right.
we end up being captured by the tripods right at the end of the film. It's like, wait, the other tripods weren't this big though, right?
Yeah, well, and some of them seem incredibly big and tall,
Well, I
but the
think
first
that
one
might
didn't
be-
seem that big.
Yeah, I think that might be what we're communicating is that there
Yeah.
are different kinds, and there are different kinds in the book, certainly.
So that would make sense, I guess.
My big problem here, well, I guess this is part of like the thematic landscape of the film, is the idea that these machines have been buried beneath the earth long ago, long before human civilization, if not long before humans, right? And that the Martians are transported to them via these lightning strikes. And I just don't know. That is a choice that Spielberg makes because he doesn't want spaceships crashing. He doesn't want to do an invasion story that has spaceships crashing to Earth because we've seen spaceships crashing to Earth 1,000 times. So he wanted to do something different, and this is what he picked. And I'm not sure that it works. Like mechanically, scientifically, it doesn't really work for me. But thematically, it also kind of falls apart because when you're talking about invasion, you're talking about imperialism. When you're talking about active colonialism, you're talking about active terraforming. Something that comes from below the earth to reclaim it kind of implies an inversion of the usual power structure.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
hear what you're saying. I do.
And it feels
That's
a little
interesting.
careless for that. I think if you don't want to do, the archetypal cylinders, right? They're just these unmarked cylinders in the H.G. Wells novel that just smash into the earth in these flaming craters and then unscrew, which is just brilliant, honestly. They're just, effectively giant bullets, right? If you don't want to do that, then do something else. Have them just appear. Have them just like teleport onto the surface of the earth or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm never sure. The lightning striking is such a brilliant effect.
It is.
And the emergence, the initial emergence that we get is extremely cool. But yeah, I'm lost in the thematic woods here a little bit. What do you
and
make
also,
of that?
if it's been thousands of years, it seems odd to say that the technology of the, whatever alien race this is, not Martians, I guess now here.
No, still, I guess Martians, right?
2005.
But nobody says Martians and nobody says aliens in the movie. Neither of those words are used anywhere.
Although
in the
they're
film,
obviously
but,
aliens. So anyway, but to think that their technology would have just been at a standstill for thousands of years to where, I mean, you think, how long since the Model T Ford?
No, sure,
it's just
but
insane.
I think that's something that Wells is drawing on, this idea that this other civilization has plateaued, that they have just reached their endpoint. These intellects, vast and cool and unsympathetic, right?
Yeah.
They're not scurrying about like we are. They are just waiting and watching and biding their time with this infinite patience, which I do kind of like because it is unearthly, because it is
unearthly.
inhuman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and the aliens, I was going to say the aliens are so inhuman, but what I mean to say, the aliens are quite animalistic in a way that also seems odd. Like when they come in and start drinking from the water pipe,
Yes.
like a dog,
Or
and you're like, you
playing
were
with the bicycle. Which is a reference to the book, because in the book, the narrator observes that the Martians had never developed wheels because the Martian terrain was unsuitable for wheeled vehicles,
That
which is why they have the
makes
walking tripods.
sense and is cool.
But then you
Interesting.
just have a cute little CGI alien playing with a bicycle and getting scared by it, which is like, is that what you want at that point in the
that's
film?
what you want. Yeah.
We're kind of losing, it's very Spielberg-y, but I wonder if we're losing a little of the tonality there, just a little bit. It's through this sequence, and particularly the deployment of the heat ray, right? The main tripod weapon, this disintegrative beam.
That's very effective for me.
Extremely
fucking
effective.
terrifying.
It's a great effect, but it's also the thing that is most redolent, I think, of 9/11, because you immediately have all of these people covered in ash and dust and debris. And it's weird, even 20 years on, almost 20 years on from the release of this film, seeing such a direct capture of the imagery of 9/11 after the fact. I think it really stands out. This is when Ray eventually returns home, just really caked in the dust. And we get a brilliant moment from Tom Cruise in his performance there where he slumps down when he gets home, and then Rachel touches his hood and he like it is a visible, palpable fear response.
Right.
He's really working for me in this part of the film.
I think so too. And I love when she says, "What's that stuff all over you?"
Yeah.
And he doesn't say it's people, but
yes.
he like goes and
washes it off. And,
yeah.
Although it is a little undercut that he goes to wash off in the sink, and when we cut to him looking in the mirror, it is like the most perfectly composed, handsome ass Tom Cruise you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, I mean,
you could have gone a couple steps down that road and not all of the way down that road.
Yeah.
He tells them that they have to pack up and that they're leaving the house in 60 seconds. And that is the 30-minute mark in the movie. We're getting this very solid structure here as we close out the first act. They take the car from the garage across the street because Tom Cruise has a moral authority over it because he previously told them to replace the solenoids in order to undo the damage caused by the EMP.
Yeah.
And he's the only person in the world smart enough to figure that out, including these guys who work at a garage.
Yeah.
We get the standoff against Manny, the garage technician there.
Which is nice. Him trying to like beg him to get in the van.
The fact
which is
that
not something
he's
he'll do
first
again.
treating it as a joke. He's like, "Hey, come on, get out of that." Like his accent is a little bit central casting, but it's it's like I am performing now. Hey, don't bust my balls here. Get out of the car. Like it's a little bit,
That's true.
but it's really tense. And this is the first moment where Rachel cries too. So it's this emotional release that propels them into action. It's really nicely constructed there. And then Manny is immediately disintegrated, so we don't have to worry about him later on in the story. We get out onto the highway, and you guys, kids at home, this is what $132 million buys you.
So cool.
It buys you miles and miles and miles of highway. It buys you dozens and dozens of cars. It buys you hundreds of extras.
Yeah.
And none of it, to my eye at least, is digitally composited.
No, it looks awesome.
It looks
horrifying.
real.
Yeah, it's really upsetting.
We do, however, do the very complicated digital composite shot of the camera moving around the car here as we are driving down the highway. Did you catch that?
I don't think I did catch that.
The camera's kind of circling the car, and we don't quite have the tech to do it in a seamless way, but it's really nicely done and very effective, I think. As Robbie is leaning into the backseat, we focus on Rachel with her preservation of her space, this little mantra that she has to calm herself down.
Very good.
The camera swings all the way around the outside of the car, and we come back with Robbie into the front seat again as he's questioning his dad about what's going on. It's really effective. As we are passing composite shots, admittedly, but as we are passing real people, real cars on the side of the road at a pace, at a speed, which is uncomfortable. They are really driving fast down that road. And it's very, very immediate.
Safety guy had a day.
Yeah, right. At Mary Ann's house, which is gorgeous, I guess Mary Ann plus Tim's house, we managed to take shelter there. Ray tries to parent, but we get the very heavy-handed scene about Rachel being allergic to peanut butter.
Yeah, that's maybe a little much. Yeah.
It's a little on the nose, but it again, very cap. It does what it's supposed to accomplish without any like real finesse or care there, and none of the actors can really elevate it. And we are demonstrating, I think, that Ray really is a terrible person. Losing his temper and throwing the peanut butter sandwich at the window is so weird and juvenile and great.
Yeah.
And then getting the reverse angle on Cruise as that sandwich is just slowly sliding down the glass.
It's good.
It's good stuff.
I like that.
They shelter in the basement only to be awoken by more flashes of light from outside. Not the lightning. This is something else now. So they do what everyone would do, of course, and take shelter in the super secret second basement. Every house
I really
has two
need one of those. We've
We've had one basement, yes.
Yeah, I envy that basement for sure, especially in Tornado Alley.
This shot of Cruise emerging from the house the following morning, coming up the basement stairs into the shell of the house with all of that exterior lighting.
It's cool.
Unbelievably good, unbelievably effective. Like
very unsettling.
Actual real world. Yeah, that's exactly it. That sense of the light is wrong is always one of my favorite things to do in film. Just it is so discomforting, right?
Yeah.
It just makes you feel so ill at ease in a scene. The house is gone, by the way, because a plane has crashed on it, and that is a real decommissioned Boeing 747 fuselage that they shipped to that scene, deconstructed. They set up the whole thing.
So cool.
It cost $1 million.
Uh-huh.
And it's in the film for maybe 4 minutes?
Yeah.
So we can do a really bad scene with these TV reporters for no real reason or effect. This does not work for me. This is the first like real crack in the film for me.
I don't mind it. Just because, again, I hate the news, and I think that there's some work being done about 9/11 and the news.
So you're reading this primarily as satire? You're reading this as a criticism of... That's interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. It certainly works better as criticism than it does as exposition, which I think is the other purpose of the scene.
Yes. And I'm grateful to get the exposition and realize just like how huge this invasion is. But really, we had a sense of that when we knew that it started in Ukraine, you know?
Yeah. I don't know that I need this sequence of seeing the tripods move across the cityscape, right? I don't know that that does anything for me that we haven't already had.
Yeah.
And I love so much.
But this is the first time we see a lot of them all at once, right?
But we're going to see them again for real life very soon. Like, I'm not sure that deploying that now I'm not sure that it increases the tension past where we were. I'm not sure that this is the moment to start formalizing our understanding of what is happening. And maybe it's worse if, because we've gone from this incomprehensible attack to the incomprehensible catastrophe of a plane falling out of the sky.
Right.
I'm not sure how exactly we navigate those different spaces. Are we supposed to read, by the way, the fact that there aren't any bodies in the plane and that he asks the reporters and then the reporters ask him whether or not they were in the crash? Are we supposed to read that a tripod has come by in the night and scooped up the bodies out of the plane? Is that part of this structure? Or because otherwise it's kind of weird. We don't see a lot of bodies at this point, right?
That's true. And there are no ashes. I'm also confused about all the people who are floating down the river later.
Is that what happened? That this plane split apart in midair and these are the bodies of
that would make sense. And just nobody had a seatbelt on? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little soft, but you cannot get past.
But it's possible if there's that time when I always leave my seatbelt on in the plane unless I get up to go to the bathroom just because it doesn't occur to me to take it off. Like, whatever, I don't care.
But in the middle of the flight, maybe no one's wearing a seatbelt. And you're right. Yeah. A slash of a heat beam and the plane could fall apart. Yeah. It's not clear, but you're right. This is the second sequence that we get here where we drive out through the back roads and northern New Jersey, I guess, looks really pretty.
Looks really
Although
great,
I guess actually these exteriors were shooting mostly in Virginia at this point, I believe.
That makes more sense. I'm getting Virginia way more than my idea of New Jersey, which I've never really seen outside from the airport.
Yeah, but a lot of beautiful landscapes that we're driving through on these back roads. Then we get the very mundane, Rachel has to pee, so she goes, doesn't want to be overlooked by her father or her brother while she's doing this, so is going further and further away, and we're getting that like extension of tension there, which is really nice. And it's deflated a little bit by, it's just bodies floating down the river. And then a jump scare of Ray grabbing her from behind, which I don't know that we necessarily need at that point. And then we come back to the car to find the army passing by. Yeah. And Robbie starts begging to join them.
Stupid. This part doesn't work for me at all. Is this also a 9/11 thing?
No, this is, it could be, right? I guess.
There were lots of people who suddenly wanted to join up. Recruitment went up. And
I guess you're right. Yes. If you kind of separate yourself from the immediacy of the tragedy, right? Yeah. And instead look at it in a more comprehensively psychological perspective, I guess, yes, that could be what it's doing. Except that we apparently like what Robbie is doing here. The film seems to think that this is valorous because we're setting him in opposition to Ray, who is still a bad dad. So maybe we're supposed to like his decision, his desire to fight back, even though that is ultimately a futile decision. Yeah,
I think so.
It doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah, mostly just because he's such a dumb kid.
He's just a sketch of a character. Like, it's barely anything at all there. And unfortunately, Justin Chatwin is not bringing anything extra to it. It's just really patty. And it is particularly bad example, a particularly egregious example of what happens when you cast a 22-year-old to play a teenager. Yeah. Because he just doesn't read as a 16-year-old. His inconstancy would make more sense if he were younger, but he's not communicating that in any way, unfortunately. That's fair. So our next big sequence, we get back into the car and we drive, and then Ray switches out with Robbie to let him drive, and suddenly we're in the midst of a crowd of people, and we get the standoff with the car, which this is really distressing. This is really tough to watch, honestly. Yeah. It's a pretty common beat in stories of this kind to get to the point where we are, turning against each other. Yeah. Where the survivors, the refugees, the people who've been exposed to this trauma are kind of robbed of their humanity, and the worst of us is revealed, right? Yeah. It's a common trope in stories of this type. Yeah. Are you ever interested in those scenes? Do you always find this kind of thing engaging, or very uncomfortable? Yeah. Like that's probably when I felt the most nervous, but it's taken too far, I think, in this sequence, particularly the guy who's like prying open the broken windshield with his hands. Yeah. Like, that is too much. Yeah. But
initially, and there's another overhead shot where everyone's just rocking the van. I'm like, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
Like, but in real life, what would you be doing? You know?
The only part of this the two parts of this that I like, I should say. The first is how acute the script is in its understanding of the world, right? It's very effective when Ray fires the gun, silences the crowd, and is then immediately accosted by another guy with a gun.
Yep.
Because there would be another guy with a gun, and he's more willing to use it than you are, sir. Like, Ray's still ineffective, even though... And I really like, too, how we are sketching this character, that it's not just that he's a bad dad because he's selfish, or he's lazy, or he's misguided, or whatever. He's actually just kind of a doofus. He's actually just bad at things.
Yeah.
And we have seen so many versions of Tom Cruise being rebellious, being, you know, outside of the lines, but being undeniably the best at what he does. And here he is frequently incapable. He's frequently ineffective.
Yeah.
And I find that so interesting.
I do too, especially in a story of this type, that's really rare to see. Like, usually you're following the MacGyver guy who can just figure everything out. But to have somebody who's really just tripping over chairs is interesting. Yeah.
The other moment here that I really like is the one that I mentioned earlier, where realizing that he has lost the van, he is instead just appealing to the man to let him have his daughter out of the back of the, which is very strong and a real moment of growth, I think, for Ray there, that he is prioritizing the safety of his daughter.
I mean, that's a low bar. I mean, to just leave her in the van is impossible. I don't think that could be forgiven. But
I think you're right. I do think it's more in Cruise's performance at that moment. He seems so desperate and so relieved to have her.
Right.
Like, he manages to sell the emotionality of that more perhaps than the script does.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. They hide inside the diner there, and then we get the brilliant shot of the other guy with the gun firing into the car from outside, which is really good to be again at that remove, to not see it clearly, to not have it be so physically immediate, but still have the emotional repercussions of it be felt by everyone in the scene. I think that's just
very
fantastic.
upsetting.
This is maybe the last point at which the film is really, really good.
I think that's probably true.
We start to slide pretty fast.
I do like the later basement stuff, but
there's a great deal of tension there, but it's almost a different kind of film at that point.
It is.
And it's so heavy on the CGI that we lose a lot of what is physical. And this is just a bunch of people in a parking lot, and it feels dangerous in a way that the later stuff doesn't completely. We do get this brilliant random sequence where we come to a railroad crossing, the crossing goes down, and then a flaming train goes by. Which, how are you supposed to transport all of your fire needs if not for a local light rail system?
It's cool. But it's
cool.
a little much.
It's dumb.
It's cool and dumb. I agree.
You just want an old timer with like a railroad hat and a stopwatch. Oh, fire train. So weird. They approach the ferry, then they run into a friend, an unnecessary friend named Cheryl, who we take the time to introduce.
This doesn't make any sense. I don't know why she's here.
Just so we can lose her again?
Yeah, immediately.
It's the weirdest thing. And then Ray manages to get them on the ferry by his cunning and sleight of hand of walking around the edge of where the guards are.
Right?
It's nothing.
I know. That whole thing was strange.
The only character beat we get here is Robbie running up the ramp trying to help the people climb on.
That to me does work.
Nice to see the kid taking action.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
that he wants to help, that he wants to be engaged, that his passion is not rooted in like a militarism. It's not a desire to harm and to hurt in retribution.
Right.
It's a desire to make things better.
Agreed.
That I find a really interesting,
much better, much more interesting,
there.
Much more moving.
And then we get, the ferry being overturned, and it's shockingly good.
It's
very
Titanic.
And awful.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
Why is that one tripod hiding under the water so that it can peekaboo out and knock over the ferry?
I don't know.
I don't
know. It doesn't make any sense. It's I guess maybe somebody's job was go destroy boats. Somebody's job is go destroy planes.
I think maybe my headcanon at that point is that it was buried beneath the earth before this was a river, right?
Oh,
because rivers change where they are, and maybe it's just taken this long to like lift itself out of the mire at the bottom of the river,
mud.
of the Hudson River Valley here, and kind of this is it emerging for the first time, and it just happens to emerge into the boat.
And I don't know. Possibly just because like the design kind of is giving giant squid, and so I'm like, what if we put one under the water?
That's true, and that was almost definitely the thought. Yes. The tripods begin scooping people up out of the river while Ray and Robbie and Rachel make it to the riverbank. And for a moment, we have that thought of safety, and we get to see this tableau of the tripods in the river and across the river. But then they also come around the riverbank on this side and just vaporizing people. It's really effective. We hide in the underbrush as one passes overhead. The sense of I don't know, the paranoia that you would feel
Yeah.
afflicted by an enemy of this capability, right? You are so exceeded in your capacity to respond to these foes. I find that really interesting. I don't know, the desperation, the hopelessness that you would feel. We walk through the night, and when morning breaks, we're in this absolutely bucolic, gorgeous, idyllic landscape.
So
This rural landscape with the mist clinging to the... It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I had no idea Virginia looked this good, honestly. And then we have the army show up, and we unleash a great deal of ordnance at the tripods, even though they are shielded, even though they are immune to all harm. And at this point, I think with the fighter jets screaming over the top, with the helicopters coming in like it's apocalypse now, this has become an exercise in excess at this point. There's just no restraint on this at all anymore. And none of the emotional beats are really landing for me anymore either. This is when Robbie actually runs off to join.
Robbie begging and pleading, I have to be a part of this. You have to let me go. Doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Just so we can separate Ray and Rachel, who is then accosted by two people who want to take care of her because she's there by herself in a scene that you keep expecting to break really, really badly. And then doesn't
quite. I would have
Ray
wanted that.
Just comes back and says, "I'm her dad,"
Yeah.
and that's it. Oh, okay, cool. Good luck.
Good luck, and they run off. Yeah,
weird, right?
True. It is weird. Yeah.
And then we're in the basement of the farm.
It was so effective when she was still in the car and everybody started climbing in around her, and my mother heart was just like, "Holy shit, no!" But I think you could have gone a little further.
Dakota Fanning crying and screaming is the worst special effect I've ever seen in my life, like the most harrowing special effect I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely.
It is emotionally ruinous to watch her go through that. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah, it made me think, again, always thinking about like child actors, I suppose, about just if I was her mom, like how much I would want to, how are you doing today? Are you okay? Are you all right with the scene? And because it looks really harrowing. Yeah.
Then we're in the basement for like what feels like a long time. And the film kind of turns into a different kind of movie. Yeah. Not least of all because the alien incursions that we get, the robo-snake that comes down to explore the confines of this basement, and then the aliens themselves are not as effective for me as the tripods are on the surface. They feel sillier. They feel much less threatening, obviously.
Yeah, I agree.
But we've got this kind of great Tim Robbins apocalyptica. We've got this
the Tim Robbins
fantastic
is giving me the most
strain here, which really works. And we managed to do a couple of really great things. The moment where Cruz is silently pleading with Ogilvy not to use the axe on the weird robo-snake,
which he then later does.
Fantastic.
All very good.
It's such a great opportunity for Cruz to express himself. Yeah. And just really try to communicate non-verbally and does fantastic work there. We do manage to dupe the robo-snake with a mirror because intellect's vast and cool and unsympathetic. Yeah. I've never seen mirrors before.
I know. It's, And
the way that it's kind of playing hide and seek with them, it doesn't not work for me in the same mode. It doesn't feel like it's part of the same film, honestly.
Yeah. I think that's fair to say. Like, I like to see them just trying to outmaneuver it and just literally run and hide is scary. But the thing itself is kind of dumb, and it just seems like such a different animal than the tripod is.
Yeah,
like
I completely
really
agree.
does.
Yeah.
So that part doesn't work for me. And it just the front just looking like a headlight. I don't know. Yeah. There's just something.
And I think that seeing the aliens themselves, as good as they are in terms of the quality of the effects for 2005, I think they're actually pretty impressive. But they're just too cute. They're just too familiar.
They're very animalistic, and they remind me a lot of the ones from Independence Day.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Those ones were scarier somehow. So I don't know. Yeah, these ones.
Just more alien. I think the more time that you spend with any creature like this, particularly a creature that is, entirely CGI,
right?
The more time you spend with it on screen, just the more familiar it's going to become. And that robs away a lot of that menace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
We are getting great performances here, though.
Certainly.
I think that Robbins is great throughout this sequence. I think he really delivers. I think that Cruz is really great throughout the sequence, too. The threat of that one moment where Robbins and Fanning are sitting on the steps.
Yeah.
The implied threat there, even though nothing happens, nothing is even said, and it makes your blood run cold.
Yeah.
It is that moment of,
if anything
my
happens to your
God.
dad, I'll take care of you. Like,
it's so great.
Yeah.
All of that tension is so brilliant. Then it's just a lot of CGI for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's true.
then eventually we get to what I guess we're supposed to read as the turning point here for Ray, that he actually kills Ogilvy.
Yeah.
This does not work for me at all.
No,
How does this stand up for you?
Honestly, if I had heard a gunshot, that would have been more believable and more harrowing.
Sure. But we have to be quiet. That's part of the reason why he has to kill him is that we have to.
It's interesting, but
Yeah.
I don't really buy
Rachel
5'8" Tom Cruise taking out 6'4" Tim Robbins.
That's
you know,
fair too. Honestly, with the power of insanity behind him. Yeah,
exactly. So I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think of this? Is the second instance. We skipped over the first one. This is the second instance of singing in the film. This is where Dakota Fanning sings Hushabye Mountain.
No, that's great. When she asks him to sing Hushabye Mountain, he doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Ask him to sing something else. And he's like, I don't know that one either. And then he sings Little Deuce Coupe with just like the most expression.
Heartbreak on his face. It's
heartbreak. Yeah.
Really good stuff.
And I can see like how we got to it. I can see him thinking like a song about my little girl, a song about my little Deuce Coupe, and
cars,
like landing on it, and cars,
right?
and and it's just like cute. It's cute's not the right word, but it's lovely. It really is. It's my favorite of his moments, I think, as a dad.
Yeah. We missed that moment too where they're struggling over the shotgun. This is near the beginning of the basement sequence where Ogilvy and Ray are fighting over the shotgun when the Robo-Snake is in the room, and they're doing it silently, and it's all so good. And then the honk sounds and the snake retreats. There are some really great, really tense moments.
It's true, it's tense.
And some great release of tension too,
Yeah.
I think. So with Ogilvy dead and they presumably safe for the night, they fall asleep on the couch. And then all of our hard work here to maintain tension is somewhat undercut by waking up to discover that the snake is back and it sees them.
Yes.
And that's it. Rachel runs out. Ray gives chase. He chops the snake, it's a cool scene.
It's cool.
It's cool. It kind of works a little bit. He runs outside, sees her be abducted, and then gets the grenades out of the ruined Humvee.
Right.
The Humvee that we previously saw
Which
very
is like
on
the
fire.
first time that he's thinking.
This is
like
the first time that he's taking action.
Yeah,
this is the first moment where he is transformed into like, no, I am now the hero of this story.
Yes, it's true.
And the fact that I think there's a very critical and cynical reading that you could make of this film, that he is transformed into a hero by the application of violence, that he kills Ogilvy because he has to. And now having done that thing, he is in the modern American heroic paradigm that he is now,
Interesting.
because there's a lot of, particularly in like the American perspective on heroism, a lot of heroism boils down to who has the power to cause violence and who has the will to cause violence. That's, kind of a large part of, superhero comics and all of those various dynamics. A lot of previous, Tom Cruise movies that we've studied. There's a lot of that in Top Gun, for sure, even though it's kind of somewhat sanitized in that film. I find that really interesting. The taking of the grenades, the throwing of the grenade, it bouncing off of the shield or exploding against the shield and doing, of course, no harm. Then his own abduction. And we're in this weird suspended, literally a suspended
cage.
But it's also oddly spatially suspended. I am unsure in this sequence where we are in regard to like the rest of the world and what is happening. We're just shrouded in mist and darkness, and it feels a little strange. Then we also have the most unpleasantly biological bit of CGI that we get in the entire movie.
I don't know why this is there, and I still don't understand the red vine blood veins everywhere.
They're on the East Coast, so they're Twizzlers. What we're supposed to take from this, I think, is that the Martians are terraforming the Earth. They are
with blood. They're
feeding these red plants the blood of people. That's what's being like sprayed out. We get to see that a couple times, particularly when we're at the window in the basement. But the red vines are some kind of Martian flora, right?
Okay.
I think that's what we're supposed to get from that.
That makes sense.
That is why they are scooping people up,
Yeah.
is that they can directly remove the blood and use that as a food for the plants and maybe even for themselves. I'm not sure,
interesting.
what we get from that.
Okay.
And anyway, then Ray delivers a grenade suppository. And destroys the tripod.
and is pulled out by everybody, which is good. Like I like this guy, the army guy, who's like, oh, I see what's happening. I see this idea, and doesn't think he's going to sacrifice himself. That's great. He thinks, and we're going to save him.
And we're going to save him.
And I
Teamwork
like that.
makes the dream work.
Yep.
We're all going to come. And then it would be easy for me to say, and then the movie's over. But very, very quickly, the movie is over at this point. Like, it is
we go back to
really
Boston.
fast.
Oh, Robbie's here. That's
Well, we do get the sequence with the tripods actually being undone. We get to the army outpost where we see that, great shot of the tripods slumped
like
against
slumping
the building.
and falling over. Yeah,
which is just a brilliant
very
piece
cool.
of art design,
Yeah,
honestly.
you're right.
Really,
you're
really
right.
strong.
I've forgotten about that.
Then Ray realizes that the birds are landing on the tripods because they're
Right.
also eating the dying red vines
Yes.
too. So he understands that the shields are down. We open fire and the tripods are defeated and the earth is safe. That's it.
Thanks, Tom.
Then
Yeah.
we go to Boston that is definitely actually Brooklyn.
Yes, definitely. Like, I've
We
never
get-
seen Boston, but that reads Brooklyn to me
Yeah.
like so much.
We get Miranda Otto again. We get Mary
Yeah.
Ann and we get, Robbie showing up here out of nowhere.
And the fact that it's already kind of lampshaded because she's just like, oh, thank you, and grabs her daughter and doesn't say, where is
say-
my son? Yeah.
Where is the other half of my progeny?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That cinema score thing that people, when they exit the movie theaters, it's a way of testing audience responses. And you rate a film from A to F on the moment that you leave the movie theater, right? And that there are great films with bad cinema scores because either they were misadvertised, so the audience did not get what they thought that they were going to get, or the last moment is so bleak or upsetting or harrowing that they walk out and immediately say F. That I don't even want. And
don't
maybe
want to think about it.
over the course of days or weeks, you will warm up to that film. You will understand what it's doing. Maybe you'll see it again. You'll have a different reaction to it. I would walk out of this film and give it an F just for this closing shot. It sucks so much.
It's pretty dissatisfying. Yeah.
I really, really hate it. It is such a misunderstanding of the scale of the film. It's such a misunderstanding of the stakes that are in play.
Agreed.
And it is so emotionally juvenile
Yeah.
that it frustrates me. I really like this film, you guys.
I do. I
Looking
thought it was
forward to
really
it the whole
cool.
time.
Yeah.
And I really like it. But wow, that leaves a sour taste in the mouth.
It does. It falls really flat there at the end.
And Morgan Freeman's final narration goes some way toward undoing
It
that.
helps, yeah.
Though
It's cool.
I have to say, I don't like it as much as I like the opening narration.
Yeah.
It's also taken from the
Yeah.
book. It is the exact end of the book. But
That is cool.
yeah, I don't know. It's a film that really falters. It starts out so strong and then
Agreed.
slips up so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's our discussion of War of the Worlds. Where are we going to put this thing on the big list?
Oh, good question. It's hard because it, of course, makes me think of Minority Report.
Absolutely.
But I like it
Yeah.
much more. I think it's much more satisfying than that one. But then it ends up in this weird land of things that are nothing like it, you know? Like, it's better than Collateral.
Yeah, Minority Report is
so-
currently number 11 on the list. Above
Yeah.
it, Collateral, Interview with the Vampire, Rain Man, The Firm, Magnolia.
See, these are all so different. It's really weird to slide in War of the Worlds and with these movies, I feel like. But
Well, let me ask you this. Is it
Sure.
much better to you than Minority Report?
no, it is not much better.
Interesting.
I don't think that it is.
I enjoy Cruise's performance more here.
Definitely.
And it stands out as something that he has never done before and will never do again. Spoilers, will never do again.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We do not get another Cruise performance like this one in his entire filmography.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that really interesting. Minority Report also kind of loses its way at the end. It's kind of a
Yeah.
dissatisfying finale, honestly.
Agreed.
And I don't know that it's much better in the finale than War of the Worlds is.
Yeah.
I do really think that the end of this movie is disastrous.
I
And
know. Yeah.
it is spoiling, even now, just recounting the events of this film. I want to recapture some of that enthusiasm that I had back when we're talking about the first act and we're talking about how
Yeah.
inventive
It's a
it is
great
and how
first act.
blistering it is.
Yeah.
It's really, really strong. I can definitely see it going above Minority Report. I can see it going above Collateral, perhaps.
I think so.
It's
It's
close.
just it's a bigger movie than Collateral, and I think the like the design of the tripods, the sound design, like there's some really cool things happening here. The just bleakness of the apocalyptic version of this world
Yeah.
with like the highways and all the people. It's pretty damn impressive.
I think so too. I think you could even argue for it going above Interview with the Vampire,
I
which
think-
of course
I
also
think I
has a
can.
really frustrating
Yeah.
finale. That is also an F
That's
on the
another
cinema
one
score
that
when I
just
walk out of that movie.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're in Rain Man. That's at number 8.
And I think that is maybe where we have to draw the line because Rain Man is just a
Rain Man is a better
properly
movie.
good film.
Yeah.
Like it's a
I feel
real
good about that.
kind of uncontested
Yeah.
classic.
The new number 9.
I could see it going in at the new number 9. I could see it going in at the new number 10, or even honestly the new number 11 and just replacing Minority Report. I don't think it can go in below Minority Report. So we've got our ceiling and we've got our floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really anywhere in there. I think I would probably rather watch it than Interview with the Vampire. Although, if we're doing a comparison between Dakota Fanning and Kirsten Dunst, that's an interesting.
Ooh, that is interesting.
It's an interesting point of comparison there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that. The new number 10, where Collateral was under Interview with the Vampire.
Excellent. And I think all of those films are very
That's a
close
good
together.
point.
I
They
think
are
that's,
close
that's a
together.
real fine hair to split.
And
there.
they have similar things right and wrong with them, I would say.
So that's it. Number 10 on the list. That's War of the Worlds. That's it for Steven Spielberg for this series. For now, at least. We talked a little at the beginning of this episode about how much division there was between Cruise and Spielberg following his appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show. But many years later, post-COVID, there's scenes of Spielberg and Cruise hugging, of Spielberg publicly thanking Tom Cruise for saving the movie theater industry with Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
So there's still time. We could maybe still get, the third in this very weird Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise sci-fi triptych.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's worth thinking about, at least. That's going to do it for The Last Star in Hollywood this week. Everything that we do here is possible thanks to your support.
We're so
the
grateful.
Bonus episode that we are about to record, where we watch Tom Cruise jump on a couch and proclaim his love for Katie Holmes, is because of your support. The fact that we are already a little unhinged at the end of 2 hours of recording is already your fault. We are grateful for all that we get to do here, and we're so grateful for you guys heading over to patreon.com/nextword and helping us do all of this.
Yes.
Elizabeth, would you like to thank our very wonderful superstar patrons?
Our superstar patrons, yes, thank you. They are Leslie Skipa, Louise in Dallas, Megan Lauder, Phoebe, Art Kilmer, Kimberly Bear, Self on a Shelf, Jolene Stark, and Chris Dawns.
Thank you guys so much. You are
Thank
welcome
you.
in our super secret second basement anytime.
Anytime.
War of the Worlds or not, Invasion of the Body Snatchers or not, any alien foe comes to Earth, you're welcome to join us. Even E.T., he's the one I trust the least. That is going to do it. Next week, wow, we return with more than a little urgency to Cruise's safe house, to Cruise's super secret second basement with JJ Abrams' 2006 movie, Mission Impossible 3.
Let's go.
Fantastic performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman anchoring that movie. I can't wait to talk about it. That'll be next week here on the show. Until then, thanks so much for listening.
We'll see you next time.